Welcome back to the Anti-Meta Club. This week we have a Group 4 race at Brands Hatch, and what I thought was initially going to be a fuel-saving race turns out to be a tire-saving race. The Alfa 4C is head and shoulders above every other car when it comes to actual race pace. The time trial is a little bit different, but I found an anti-meta car that's pretty good in both. Let's get into it. For whatever reason, regardless of what the actual meta car is, the Citroen seems to be a really good contender for the second best. It really does kind of fit the description of the anti-meta meta car. The meta car when it comes to defeating the meta car. So once again, it's my pleasure to bring to you the Citroen. Like I said before, the Alfa 4C is definitely the best car when it comes to race pace because of its ability to save tires. However, the Supra seems to be the meta car when it comes to the time trial. I was able to put the Citroen in 21st place with a 27.6, and there's at least another 10.5 left in it. Here are the damper settings that I used, though I'm not exactly sure how much of a difference it's going to make. I also used +2 brake balance, but really that's going to be up to your preference. As soon as the lap starts, you'll notice the 3 markers on the left. There's a marshal after the second one. We're going to brake right before we get to him, and we want to turn before we get to the last marker. Be very careful not to come off the brakes too suddenly, and don't get on the throttle too suddenly either. Since you're going downhill, anything that you do too suddenly is going to cause the car to slide, especially the front tires, and you'll probably understeer off into the sand. Come all the way back on track before you get to the grass, and looking for this bridge, we're going to brake when we get fully underneath it. As soon as you brake, we want to get down to third and then to second because we're going to dive for the apex, making it a double apex corner. First gear should help the car really rotate around, then get back up to second and on the throttle as soon as you can. You don't even have to be that careful. A little bit of oversteer is going to be better than waiting a long time and then gently getting on the throttle here. As soon as you come off this curb, aim for the next curb. We're going to brake right before we get to it, making sure we only use the red and white part of the curbing on the outside. Get to third gear, and we want to just barely use the curb. Again, we want to avoid the grass because the grass will make the car oversteer way too much. If you're understeering on corner entry, make sure you lift off the brakes fully when you're trying to turn in for the last bit of the corner. This car benefits a lot from steering a lot more after coming fully off the brakes. When we get to this corner marker here on the right, we're actually going to turn in before braking. We're going to start braking, but gently when we get to this gray mark on the road, and we're going to hold that brake pressure as we try to steer in, downshift to third, and then make sure that we don't go all the way up on this curb when we try to get really close to apex it. Continue steering in as you get on the throttle, making sure, of course, not to let your car understeer or oversteer because you can very easily go off on that corner. It's a very, very tricky corner. Also of note, don't trust your sector times on that last sector ending because it's in the middle of deceleration, so it's never accurate. Right before we get to this final corner marker on the left, we're going to turn in and brake simultaneously, downshift to 5th and then 4th, and when you get to 4th, we're going to just let the car coast, and when you feel it rotate, that's when we're going to get back on the throttle. Mid-corner speed is just as important as exit speed on this corner, so make sure you don't slow down too much. Our next braking point is the red mark on the barrier to the left. We're going to brake fairly heavily, but immediately get off the brake because we're in 4th gear, and we're going to try to go directly over this curb. Too much over this curb is going to make you understeer. Too little is also going to make you understeer, and it can also just make you bounce if you hit it strange, but you'll know you hit it perfectly when you go all the way up on the exit curbing. Staying as far as we can to the left, we're going to look for the second brake marker, and like the last corner, we're going to very sharply but shortly hit those brakes. Once again in 4th gear, we're going to steer towards this apex right here, and we're going to try to use as much of the curb as we can while still keeping our outside tires on the pavement. You've got to be real brave on exit, but of course if you touch the grass, you're likely to spin out. At this final brake marker on the right, our braking is going to be very sharp and short, just like the previous 2 corners, using 3rd gear to make sure that we use as much of the red-white curbing on the entry as well as the exit, trying not to use the grass whatsoever because it's just going to slow you down or make you spin out. For the final corner, please pay attention to the elevation changes mid-corner. The final corner marker on the left is the perfect place to start braking. We're going to immediately trail brake, and please note how early I come off the brakes, making sure I turn in afterwards, trying to hit this apex, and being very gentle on the throttle because there's a bit of a downhill section right here, and you can see from the runoff that they built there, lots of people go off there. For the best possible time, hug the right because it is the shortest distance to the end, and there's your lap. T1 can be kind of a nightmare on this track. It's really difficult because of the elevation changes, but just be very gentle with all of your inputs and try to use as much of the track as you can. I like to treat Druids, which is this corner, as a double apex. I kind of missed both apexes, but I kept up enough speed that it didn't matter too much. I have been able to go nearly a full 10th faster there though. I mentioned it in the breakdown a lot, but the car really likes to rotate when you get fully off the brakes. A lot of cars you need to trail brake for a really long time. This car you actually need to get off the brakes a lot earlier than most cars that you drive. I also mentioned that sector time is really deceptive. A lot of times when you're ahead there, you're actually going to be slower by the next one. Not every time, but just try not to pay too much attention to that one. This next sector time right here is actually the one that can tell you how your lap's going. From this corner on, it's really important to make sure that you're keeping as much momentum as you can. You'll notice I'm braking for a lot less time in a lot of these corners. This one up here is really tricky because you can't really align yourself with the outside of the track, and it's going to feel like you're going off the track all the time, but if you do feel like you're completely out of control, you're probably going just about fast enough. Just like the first corner, the final corner has a lot of weird elevation changes kind of right in the middle of it, so just be very gentle with your inputs and be very patient, because if you step on the throttle too quickly, you'll just go all the way into the sand, just like T1, and of course it's heartbreaking because it's the very end of the lap. But you got this. Good luck. When it comes to race strategy, the only thing that's actually viable is not stopping for tires. The Alfa 4C, without a question, is better than any other car in the class when it comes to tire saving. You'll have a lot of tire life left over if you use that car. The Citroën, Megane Trophy, McLaren, and NSX can also make it and have a little bit of tire left over. Any other car is either going to run out of tire before the end of the race, or it's going to run out of tires so early that it's not going to be worth using, unfortunately. They kind of dropped the ball not making this a required pit stop, because that means that really only 6 or 7 cars can stand a chance at winning in any situation. I wanted to preface this race by mentioning that because Ethan in front is actually using a car that I used, and I could not keep the tires alive the entire race, which means that he's going to have to go through and do everything that you're about to see while trying to save the tires. And saving tires involves a few different things. In GT Sport, not as much in this, that meant that you couldn't brake at 100% because that would eat up the front tires. Other methods include steering as little as you can, making sure you don't over or understeer, being extremely gentle with the tires, and just overall keeping the tires at a low temperature. Some people even just choose to take the corners deliberately slower in an effort to make sure that you're not using too much tire, but that's of course very difficult to do when you're trying to pass people. Adjusting your brake bias allows you to control which tires get more damaged under braking. Positive adjustment moves the brake bias more towards the rear, and so that's what I did. I put it at +5 so that the rear tires get more damage than the front. If my front tires get all the way worn, then I'm going to understeer everywhere, and understeer is just always slower than oversteer. It's a lot easier to control a car oversteering around a corner quickly than it is to try to make a car that doesn't want to turn move quickly. I was prepared to sit behind this Supra and try to make some kind of move a little bit later, but luckily for me, he made a bit of a mistake and I was able to get right up next to him pretty early on so I could continue the battle with Ethan. A lot of people choose just not to even try to pass in this corner, and some people won't even try to defend, but I'm going to always give people space, so it really doesn't matter what corner it is. If I've got an opportunity, I'm going to go for it. As you saw, Ethan was able to get in front of him a lot earlier than I could, but because he had more traffic, I was able to catch up to them pretty easily too. It's always a little scary seeing people go too wide on this corner just because how dangerous it is and how easy it is just to completely lose out and go into the sand, but with that third person there, these two still managed to keep it clean, which was really cool. I always go really wide when it comes to this hairpin because even if people take it pretty quickly, when you've got multiple people trying to take the same line, it usually slows down everyone. And I really lucked out there. I didn't realize it was my boy 51 driver, so that was cool. I actually turned in too early, but because I did that, I ended up rotating my car on his front bumper, and it worked out perfectly. With that guy going off right there, that was another free position, and we found ourselves at 8th place already, and I'd finally overtaken Ethan. Less than a lap later, we'd encountered 4 people battling all at that same hairpin where I was able to make the last move, and I definitely didn't have enough room to make any kind of move this time. It's really difficult to choose a line when it comes to following people you don't know, so I just stayed wide and hoped that I could make a move on the exit, but no, we just stayed safe and stayed behind all of them. Remembering the fact that people following really close are going to have that accordion effect, I decided to go for a dive and it really worked out. I was able to actually get in front of him before the apex, and I was able to get on the throttle early enough to stay with the pack ahead, but of course Ethan was right on my tail again. The little trick that Ethan employed was following me through as I made a pass. If you can stay close enough to someone in front of you making a pass, then there's nothing that the person getting past can do about both of you going through, as long as you both keep up a good amount of momentum. And since Ethan and I race each other pretty frequently, he knew that I was going to be able to keep up speed through that corner, and so he followed me right through without incident. I like to get really close before complicated corners like this. just to give people a lot of pressure, but I then back off as we go through the corner because I don't want to be really close if they spin out or something like that. It didn't seem like my pressure had any effect, so luckily we're still close enough and we can continue trying to pressure him into making mistakes on the next corner. Unfortunately for me, my pressure didn't do anything, and in fact, all three of the guys ahead of me went way faster than I did. With Ethan being really careful not to destroy his tires, he didn't even give me a bump draft because it doesn't really matter. We don't really need it. We're still close enough to the people ahead, and he's close enough to me, though I did make a bit of a mistake here, and he decided to back off instead of going for a move there. Like I said before, I like to follow the outside line. However, if the outside line ends up being slower behind another car, you can quickly transition to the inside line, and that's what I did there. It's really sketchy trying to trust a random person you don't know, and as you can see, he was just going to go for it no matter what I did, so I just slotted behind him, and that gave Ethan the chance to move right up next to me. That makes the move that Ethan's making even more impressive. Before we got to the apex, he did position his car there, and that guy did see him, so I might have actually been okay to trust that guy when I was trying to pass him on the outside, but because Ethan made that hole, I was then able to follow him directly through, and we both got the pass on that guy. Making that move probably ate up a lot of the tires that Ethan did not want to eat up, but it seemed to be a worthwhile sacrifice because the guy behind us was falling back really quickly, and Ethan was able to maintain his pace and stay within the slipstream of the people ahead. Another way to save tires is to stay within the slipstream of someone ahead and brake very gently. You don't have to stay on the throttle to stay with them, so you can slow down more gradually as you're entering corners, and I think that's what Ethan was doing, though I'm not 100% sure how much he was saving under braking. It had been almost a full lap since we had any kind of movement, but with this guy not defending whatsoever into this corner, Ethan took advantage of it and went straight in. I actually thought they were going to collide really hard, but they ended up giving each other space, and it slowed down the 4C enough that once again on that same corner, I was able to get right behind Ethan, and we passed yet another one of the meta cars. On to the next lap one more time, Ethan was able to make a really big move going into this hairpin and cleanly get in front of the Lexus. I, however, did not find any success trying to follow him through. The Lexus has really good acceleration, really good power, and this guy was a really good driver, so I wasn't able to follow Ethan this time. I was too far away, and on top of that, if he had Ethan's slipstream, he was definitely going to be able to go a lot faster than me through this straight, so if I went for a move, I would probably just get out accelerated and it would waste both of our time. However, I did try to sneakily get right next to him, but he squashed that really quickly without pushing me off. That was clean. I did, however, notice how much space he gave Ethan and how much he really was aware of passing opportunities, so I went for my own dive. I stayed to the inside. He hit me a little bit on the turn in, and I think he expected me to push him off, so he actually just completely lifted right there. You can't really blame someone for assuming someone passing on the inside is going to try to push him off, but as you can see, I left him space, and he decided just to slow down. Unfortunately for him, that cost him another position because of the 4C right behind, but these are sometimes the things you got to do in Gran Turismo, because unfortunately the penalty system still doesn't work very well, so being extra cautious a lot of the time is the best move. So about 2 laps to get to the next group of drivers, and luckily those two were already battling, and when 2 people are battling, of course it's going to slow him down, and Ethan smelled blood in the water and went for his move. It was such a decisive move that it slowed down Bastion enough for me to get right next to him, and again we can just follow Ethan as Ethan carves a path through all of the drivers on the track. The beginning of the 9th lap, Ethan is able to make another move on the 2nd place driver, and then I'm able to follow him straight through. Gito and I have a pretty good relationship now that we've had our run-ins in the past, but now we give each other a lot of space. I think he felt bad about the fact that he had accidentally punted me off in the last race, but it definitely wasn't on purpose. He just slid out a little bit and I went off. No harm, no foul, not mad at him whatsoever, but I think because of that, he wanted to just be extra generous and he didn't even fight me when I went for that pass. Lap 10, Ethan makes it known really early on that he's going to go for a pass opportunity right here, and Turbozy, really smartly, unlike pretty much everyone else that we've passed, decides to slot in right behind Ethan, and he was able to keep up momentum and stop me from following Ethan through. Knowing Turbozy had the advantage here, having Ethan's slipstream, I went ahead and set up a dummy. I'm not going to actually dive, I'm not going to go into him, and I'm not going to make a really stupid risky move, but sometimes when you just position yourself, people make mistakes wondering if you're going to do something silly. It's kind of a funny technique, and it honestly, it kind of feels dirty to do, but as long as you don't do anything dirty along with it, there's really no problem. It happens all the time in racing. I talk about this all the time, but I think my reputation with Turbozy worked against me, because Turbozy knows I'm not going to do anything stupid and punt him off the track, so even if I position myself in what seems like a dangerous position, he's still just going to take his normal lines, as he should, and so I don't have the added psychological benefit of freaking him out into a mistake. Despite the fact that we both hit the grass, I think because the Supra has much worse tire wear than the Citroen does, I was able to keep up a lot more momentum. And so getting in front of him before the corner was pretty easy, and that was that. Now, we just had to chase Ethan, but unfortunately, he was already a second and a half ahead. It didn't really matter how much worse that car was on tires because Ethan is an incredibly good driver, both very fast and good at saving tires, so that was unfortunately pretty much it. Jumping to the end, I was able to catch up just a little bit to Ethan. I think he actually had full red on at least one of his front tires, but again, he's a very good driver and there's only so much I can do when I was a second and a half behind him. Now, I don't want to say it was all because of Ethan, but I'm not sure I would have been able to make all of those passes and get first place. So even if Ethan wasn't here, I think I probably would have ended up in second, maybe. But either way, really good race, Ethan. Good stuff. A really big shout out to everyone else in that race too. Everyone was really fair, but also really tough. And no one really gave up the spot except for that one time Gito did, so a big thanks to Gito. And a hilarious thanks to Driver, 51 Driver. I'm sorry for turning into you, but thank you for helping me rotate my car. As usual, thank you very much for watching my video. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. And I know I've been saying this for weeks, but I'm finally almost ready to release my biggest project yet. I think you're really gonna like it. Stay tuned.